Good morning, everybody. Well, I'm feeling privileged to have very good colleagues of the industry, but more than that, friends of mine here on stage. And the first one in Dubai. I have 38 fever degrees right now. I'm not feeling very well, but this guy is going to give me the best energy. But let's talk about real-world assets. But before that, I would like that each of you introduce yourself. And let's start with the ladies. Anna, who are you?
I'm here only for gender equality. So anyway, I'm head of BD at Cointelegraph, Accelerator, and upcoming VC. I'm looking for new startups, and we've been so skeptic for LWA for many years. But for the past couple of years, climate changed, the industry changed, and now we are very bullish and happy to support, invest, and promote real-world asset.
Thank you so much. And now let's go with the host and the founder and CEO of Zeebu. We're on Zeebu stage show. We cannot get better than that.
Thank you for the introduction, Andreas. So as he said, I'm the founder and CEO of Zeebu. At Zeebu, we're all about tokenizing real-world assets and most importantly, bringing consumptive use to Web3. Right. So earlier, the liquidity that was flowing around in Web2, at Zeebu, we are actively converting that. And over the past 8 months, we have done so for about $1.5 billion in transactions, which would have otherwise happened through TradFi. In the past 8 months, it's happened through DeFi. So that's what we're all about at Zeebu.
Amazing. I'm talking about real-world assets and construction, especially now with everything that happened yesterday. Let's introduce Robin from Propchain. I know you are building something with real-world assets and real estate.
Yeah. Yeah, the real-world assets in real estate was not the best to be in here in Dubai over the past 2 days because we have let ourselves into severe damages on the properties. But co-founder of the Propchain ecosystem. In the Propchain ecosystem, we are focused on the tokenization of real estate assets, but more importantly, the infrastructure behind it of bringing real estate data on chain. And that goes quite broad, and happy to shine a light on that during today's panel.
Thank you so much, Robin. And of course, we have one of my good friends from the industry, Vugar. He's not only the chief operating officer of Bitget, but he has an amazing podcast. What kind of competition in the podcast industry? Oh, we help each other.
You've been guest at mine. I haven't been guest at yours.
I have to invite you. But yeah, Vugar,
Am I losing on a competition or winning? You better get me on the show. Yeah, I am Vugar, chief operating officer of Bitget, one of the largest exchanges. We handle more than $10 billion worth transactions every day and serve 25 million customers across the globe. And definitely, I'm very excited about real-world assets and how technology can take things to the next level, especially from the exchange point of view. It's very important because real-world assets represent a huge value and transactional value, and I believe that there's a huge opportunities I want to discuss today, and I'm very keen about deep in projects, and I think we can also shed light on that.
Thank you so much. And I didn't introduce myself, so my name is Meneses, the co-founder and CEO of OG Media Group, where we are specialized to help the top projects, the top exchanges, and layer ones to get their message right to the right people and grow the industry. That's it. So let's dive in. Real-world asset tokenization has been one of the hottest narratives this year, and it's also one of the that will dominate the next bull run. I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I remember when I was talking to Robin about 8 months ago, it wasn't that hot back then, but now it's getting hotter.
We're not popular.
So, but not popular. Let's start with Raj. Tell us how you think real-world tokenization can revolutionize the DeFi era, and what do you expect to witness in this year and the next? So let's start with Raj. What do you think will be the revolution of real-world assets?
Right. Look, there's a few things to talk about there. My focus is always on consumptive use when it comes to blockchain technology and converting real-world assets that might be even, let's say, receivables, as an example, right? Because real-world assets don't always have to be tangible. They can be virtual in a sense as well. So think about an invoice that's due in 90 days, 45 days, or 6 months that has a floating value itself, right? Now, anytime someone brings that on chain, maybe pays an interest against borrowing it, or simply uses blockchain technology to transact against that invoice, that's essentially tokenizing a real-world asset, right? And whatever fee they pay in that case, actually becomes a consumptive use. It's similar to, let's say, taking an Uber, right? When you take an Uber, you pay the guy, let's say, $20. You're not expecting to get that $20 back. So from my perspective, for Web3, real-world assets bring revolution in the sense that it brings consumptive use, and it brings in liquidity that will stay within Web3. It won't just be speculative.
Okay, let's dive a little bit more into this because I know probably not many people know about what Zeebu does, but this is really important. I studied telecommunication engineer. All of us, we use our phones all the time, you know.
Right.
But there is a lot of background behind. There is a lot of carriers. You have to pay a lot of fees between carriers. But can you explain what Zeebu does and how you're going to help the industry with real-world assets?
Right. So most of the people in the room with us today might not be completely aware of the function of a telecom carrier. Right. So if you look at telecom service providers, there's the infrastructure providers, which is the towers, et cetera, and the submarine fiber cables that are underwater. There's the cell phone service providers, which are the operators, and then there's the telecom carriers. Zeebu specifically caters to telecom carriers. They're the ones that connect with, let's say, AT&T and Do to transfer voice, SMS, and data cross borders. Because AT&T and Do aren't directly interconnected, hence they need to work with these telecom carriers. Okay. And what Zeebu does is we provide them cross-border transaction services within 10 minutes or so,
Okay.
which originally took 3 to 16 days.
Wow. Okay, so you're speeding the things up.
Entirely.
Okay, that's amazing. Now let's go from telecommunication, let's go to real estate. Robin, when we talk about real-world problems which we conquer through tokenization, what's the first one that comes to your mind, and what do you think it has been a major problem in the real world? And also, what are your views? I know you're very into real estate and real-world assets within real estate.
Yeah. So we have specifically chosen for real estate because I believe that if you're looking at the current RWA space now, there's a lot of shortcuts, I believe. If you look at what is being tokenized today, then you're looking currently, generally speaking, at treasury bills, securities, and so forth that already benefit from a globally recognized system, right? So looking at that and comparing that to private markets, like, for example, real estate, like art, like wines, and so forth, you're not benefiting from a globally recognized system yet. If you look at tokenization in the basics, they are always preaching the USPs of tokenization being liquidity and being the transferability of assets. But taking that to that private market environment is not making any sense. Tokenizing a real estate asset here in Dubai or somewhere else in the world doesn't necessarily mean that today, now all out of a sudden, everyone is interested in that piece of that real estate asset, right?
Yeah.
So what we are trying to do is seeing tokenization of RWAs, especially of private market RWAs like real estate, as only like 10 or 15% of our operation. What is a lot more important than where we are focused on with Propchain is to bring that actual real estate data on chain, which is going to solve a lot of problems that we're facing in real estate. Having a real estate background myself from traditional finance side, from financing real estate developers and placing capital, what I see is that due diligence, for example, is taking us insane amounts of time. If we are acquiring a commercial asset or whatsoever, it's taking us 4 months, 5 months, sometimes even, to get all of that data. It's also costing us a lot of money. On average, when we are doing an acquisition, you're looking at somewhere in the range of $100 to $400K that we're spending on the due diligence. By now taking that data out of silos and kind of combining all those different elements of due diligence around real-world assets, like fiscal due diligence, financial due diligence, legal due diligence, and so forth, and then bringing that on-chain, making it immutable, brings our due diligence timelines back to only 10, 20 minutes, and is also bringing our costs back by like 80%. So that's kind of what we are solving when it comes to real-world assets in private markets that are now living off-chain or non-digital, so to say.
Thank you, Robin. Talking about risk management and due diligence, Anna, you lead the Cointelegraph Accelerator. You probably have seen thousands of projects, thousands of tokens. So according to you, what are the risks associated with investing in tokenized real-world assets through DeFi platforms when it comes to accelerators like Cointelegraph? What are the key factors that are looked into for any real-world assets tokenization initiatives?
That's the tricky question. So we are in the Web3. We live in our space. We have our own taxes, DEXs, and we like to feel ourselves crypto banks, and we can avoid governments. Real-world asset, this is a field where we have to say hello to the real world. Okay. And this is the field where we have to do due diligence, not only with Web3 analytics that we have. At Cointelegraph, we have around 12 due diligence team members, and we track from 3,000 projects over the year. Talking about real-world asset, you have to rely on Web2 legal as well. If we're talking about Web3, we have to be secure about technology. I don't believe in real-world asset teams that appeared 2-3 months ago without no proper experience in this field. We have to track the smart contracts, and it might be reliable chain. I work with Base closely. I work with Propchain team. So if we are talking about real-world asset, we have to pick trustable chains, trustable partners that big boys from Wall Street can rely on, even we are from Web3. I would mention these two key factors, and you have to rely on Web2 legal team, because we have to track real treasure, gold, even stable coins, everything. Yeah, so real-world asset due diligence is the most expensive one. That's why we were trying to stay a little bit away from this kind of project.
But not longer anymore.
Not longer anymore.
Finally, we're coming.
And I don't know if you have a question about legislation, but
let's go for it.
We can talk about technology as long as...
we need another panel for that.
I mean, it's not the right panel, but I know that you've been ready from technology perspective.
Yeah.
Like 2-3 years ago, but we experienced a bear market, we experienced a lack of trust to tokenization in common word, right?
Yep.
Finally, we've got MiCA. I always say that bad legislation is always better than no legislation at all. Okay. So I expect for more real-world assets in Europe, not US, sorry. I'm so sorry for Propchain.
It's getting there.
Yeah, so now they're exploring new markets because of an unclear US legislation.
Yep.
And with Dubai, with Bali, which is two major markets for real-world assets, you launch those projects. It's not scalable yet. It's from project to project. Very manual, handmade, structured contracts.
Yep.
So if we're talking about real-world asset as a huge vertical for investment perspective, we have to talk to governments, and we have to get support from them. At the moment, it's still a little bit shady zone. It's high-risk zone for everyone who jumped into real-world contracts, deals, who put money on it. Investors, clients, tech part, right?
Yep.
So it's still a little bit casino, but hopefully, we will agree, at least with Norwegian government, we will agree with Indonesian government, we will show good cases to the world, and we will scale real-world asset as a huge, trustable vertical, not only for the investment, but also for the consumers.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. We come from DeFi. Now let's talk about crypto exchanges, Vugar. So concerning exchanges, how would you contrast the rate of user growth with other sectors such as gaming and meme coins, right? In your opinion, how solid the narrative surrounding real-world assets concerning token utilities in centralized exchanges?
I love how you put like something with no assets at all, like meme coins versus like a real-world assets. But like to begin with, I believe like just because we can put things on chain, it doesn't mean we have to. For example, the old school record keeping was on a paper, then it became printed in an A4 format. Today we all get like a digital copy of title deeds, for example, if you buy today real estate, which comes to your email, but still it's in like an A4 format. And I think when Anna mentioned, like, it's very important to involve governments to, to participate in these with smart contracts. But if we get into, again, back to A4, and it will be another version of this digital smart contract that isn't actually machine reading, it means we're going to fail. Another important aspect from the transactional value perspective, that real-world assets are really expensive. They represent a huge money. But again, if you look at the transaction cost or value-add cost, there isn't much actually happening. Because again, if you today want to buy a real estate, there will be a lot of costs that associated with the government. But what maximum gets the real estate agent? 2%. And that's it. It's not like a huge representation, or even like a bank transactions doesn't represent much. Therefore, I think we have to understand, even though we're going to put real-world assets into blockchain and smart contract, what kind of value we're going to add. And when it comes from an exchange perspective, when we list projects, why I mentioned like a deep in projects in the beginning, because I believe there's a value that can be added. For example, you have, I don't know, electric car, and ideally, or probably you also have a charging station in front of your house, but usually you don't use it during the day when you commute to the work. Maybe you want to rent that charging station to your neighbors, and having it on-chain could definitely help to have a faster transaction, add more value, and actually make a better use of that real-world asset. And there are some projects that already do this, and I definitely see there's a value add on top of tokenizing this real-world asset. If we just go and basically convert that PDF contract into smart contracts, probably we won't be adding much value. Therefore, I think it's very important to understand what kind of value we are adding by bringing projects on-chain and how it can benefit the entire industry. Because otherwise, there will be a lot of kind of on-chain money happening without industry actually benefiting. And by adding real-world assets, we can, I don't know, 100x the market, but it won't necessarily increase the market. It won't increase the Bitcoin's price and so on, because still transaction will happen on USDT, and things just will pass through us without us adding value or us gaining value. And when we talked about mobile operators, for example, everyone uses the same tower. No matter you have the $10 phone or $1,000 phone, you are a billionaire, you are an average person, everyone uses the same infrastructure. And I think that's one place where like a mobile or telecommunication industry lost it a lot, that there is no much add value, and everyone uses the same towers. And probably today in UAE, there are like 3 operators and all use the same towers.
Yeah.
And there isn't much benefit added. Therefore, I think we have to be super smart on the world assets we are tokenizing and why we are doing that.
Thank you so much. And talking being smart, Raj and Robin, you're very smart because you jump into real-world assets before everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So we have telecom and real estate, but gentlemen, where else we can find substantial growth of real-world assets? Any other industries that you can think about?
Yes. I mean, look at any dividend-producing micro-security there is out there, right? Traditionally, company builds out its valuation. They either get an investment bank to underwrite them or take them on a best effort basis, take them public on a stock exchange. They get auditors. It's a very, very extensive process, right? Incredibly expensive to bring real-world assets on-chain.
Always.
Now, let's say you're Post Malone. A lot of these music artists like to sell their albums and master rights eventually at some point in their lives, simply because they live expensive lifestyles and they want to continue funding it. They lose out on a lot of future revenue and royalty income over time because they sell the entire master rights at a time.
Yep.
Some private equity firm like Blackstone comes in, picks it about a good value, builds a nice 10 to 15 a year royalty value for themselves. With asset tokenization, they wouldn't need to take the long route of going with an investment bank, somehow taking the asset public or OTC. They could simply partner with a securities NFT issuer, take 40% of that asset and give retail investors, retail everyday investors, access to assets that they never had access to before, right? Because if you even look at the Beatles album, I don't even know how old the Beatles are now.
Older than you.
They've produced about an average of 11% return annualized, year over year, since the Beatles became a thing, really. That beats inflation in most markets, So music, real estate, oil fields, refineries, all of these micro securities under $400 to $500 million that are dividend producing have a lot of scope to be tokenized on a part basis. Also, for asset owners themselves, since they're not selling the entire asset, they can leverage a certain percentage of it to build out their second asset, rather than having to leverage the entire amount as a loan. They're actually bringing on additional partners with them. So I think that's where most of the value for real-world asset lies. But along with that, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just tangible assets, it's also virtual ones with shorter LTVs, right? You look at, speaking about cell phone service providers, tower infrastructure, telecom operators today, they sign up with these tower companies, right? They don't pay the tower companies for 90 days, 6 months at a time. So once the towers are built up, the tower companies don't pay their vendors for 90 days, 6 months at a time. So there's a large value in factoring those invoices and bringing them on chain as well. With the current inflation, the return on that on an insured basis is about 14 to 15%, and uninsured factoring is about 18 to 24%. Now, that's another product that retail has never had access to before. It's been highly institutionalized. So tokenizing that makes a lot of sense.
But also, I think like the best asset to tokenize is like a human time, because a gig economy, creators economy, any transaction that happens to peer-to-peer, right? You take a Karim ride to this place, it's between driver and you, and definitely it can be tokenized, and it's a real-world asset, your time or your favorite creator, or even like an upcoming artist. You don't have to just sell your, like all your library, but also you can support an upcoming artist by tokenizing or like investing in their future and having piece of what they're gonna create in future. And I think that's the most exciting part, because taking the real-world asset for me, like they're very mature already. They have the value, like it's like a real estate in London. It doesn't take a smart man to go in and invest, because 99% you are right by investing if you have enough money. But investing in an upcoming neighborhood, investing in an empty plot land, and when after like 20 years it's built something, I don't know, a palm in Dubai. I think like tokenizing that and adding value is much a longer vision and can create more investment opportunities, and I think that's what excites like us from the centralized exchange point of view. Otherwise, for example, like I can give you an example, right? You have this project with exciting tokens, you invest early on and token price goes up, and then there's a USDT transactions that they're like a very minimum, everyone competes, no one actually earns much. And I don't want us end up in that USDT real world assets part, and therefore I think we need to be very creative, like how we can put next Airbnb on chain, and it's still about the real world assets with added value.
Thank you. And Robin, anything else? I know the guys, they took the book.
No, I think that most have been said, but where we are really focused at in what we are doing, and what I believe that the whole space now in RWA should be doing is starting with the bottom line result, right? Yeah. Before you start building something, you should really ask yourself, is what we're going to build really making sense, and is it actually optimizing the bottom line result? So if you look at that in the current security space, as I mentioned in the beginning of the panel, I mean, that's where we actually see bottom line result, right? To like a traditional securities curve, let's say mortgage-backed securities, we're looking at around 13, 14 servicers to that particular set of securities. By tokenizing the majority of that, you can already leave 8 of them out, So there's true, tangible result, bottom line result when tokenizing these assets. I fully agree with real estate. For us personally, the focus has never been to now really tokenize a market and trying to bring the fractions of those assets to the marketplace, because we do realize that in general, I mean, these models exist. We have crowdfunding. I mean, these things are around for a decade, right? The reason why we believe we needed to take that step of tokenizing the assets and building an app so that people can actually buy fractions of real estate in a tokenized manner within, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes, is to prove our case, right? That the digital revolution is taking place. And the biggest struggle that I personally see now in RWA, why it's not picking up, is because people go into the rabbit hole of building applications again that are really focused on a Web3 crowd. That doesn't make sense, I mean, you're going to service and optimize portions of the curve, but the big volume is in Web 2 still. So what we are really focused on is building those bridges between Web 2 and Web 3 so that we get that adoption, we prove our case, and further down the line, when that time comes that everything digitizes and also private market assets find their globally accepted framework, then we can actually see the real result, like liquidity and being able to just take your real estate asset, which is already on chain, which is recognized by the oracles that we have connected to the government, for example, with the land registries. Dubai is really advanced here. And we can take that asset and lend against it and spend it wherever we like. I mean, that's the future state, but we have a long route to go. I think we're looking at least 5 to 10 years more of development before we will find that framework for a globally accepted market.
I want to add that also real-world asset, they are USD patched.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about venture capital perspective, we are in the Web3. We are hunting for yet another unicorns. We are hunting for 10x's more. So it's not a problem. It's a challenge. At the moment, 99% all asset dedicated to USD.
Yep.
As far as crypto will gain mature, once people will believe in Bitcoin, in Ethereum, Solana, wherever, once people will be ready to patch their businesses to crypto coins,
Yep.
we will have way more cases where people can earn money still doing these real world assets.
Yep.
That's my takeaway.
I was going to ask you a question up, so you answered already. I was going to ask you, how do you see real world assets for the next few years from an entrepreneur or investor point of view?
My forecast may be longer than 5 years.
Yeah.
We're still at technology stage, and we still practice how it will work, how people will use smart contracts, how people will use their wallets, how they will transfer coins from one account to another one. Yep. But I don't expect yet another unicorns in this field, to be honest. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Wherever. Yeah, but in 5-10 years, I think it's yet another unicorn space. And if you have deep pockets, if you are ready to wait, if you can invest for this runway, that's something that I will definitely bullish on. Not only real estate.
Thank you so
Me
much.
neither. I'm more bullish on the infrastructure, honestly, because I think that that is what will drive it. And then we will see all the use cases on pop. As you're saying, I also believe that 5 years is the minimum that we will need in order to find the base layer of that. The reason why we see it obviously pick up heavier in traditional securities like treasury bills and stuff is because the infra is to a certain extent already there on a global scale. Which is also the reason why we decided not to go there, because I think the opportunity for growth, as you're saying, with deep pockets you can reach far, is bigger in the private markets than that it is in the currently existing markets. You see it as well now in the adoption, right? You see the huge surge in stable coins, which are backed by treasury bills now, for example. And you see still that the private markets are really struggling to get volume and TVL collected. Which is perfectly fine, because for us, again, it's only like a small portion of our focus.
Thank you. Guys, I have the final question for all of you, and especially we have early adopters and people that woke up really early to come and see you. I can see people here are industry leaders at their own space. I want to ask you, let's start with Robin and then go all the way to Raj. As an industry leader, for real world assets or wherever you're working right now, what is your ultimate goal to help the industry, Robin?
My ultimate goal to help the industry? I think that for us, the ultimate goal is to establish a collaborative nature in the industry where we are focused on. I mean, what I always like to say is that I think that it's pure egoism if you believe that as a company you're going to digitize the industry that you're trying to digitize on your own. If you're looking at real estate, then where we are active in, I mean, you're looking at probably one of the biggest asset classes worldwide. So we believe that everything starts with collaboration, collaboration with governments, collaboration with the big four, let's say, of real estate, but also with auditors, banks, you name it. So for us, my ultimate goal is to create an ecosystem where the players from my industry can collaborate and can come together to build on that grand vision of digitizing the entire value chain of real estate.
Thank you.
That's
Vugar?
my goal.
Thank you.
I think, in my opinion, the most important, especially for the audience who woke up today and came here, is to kind of catch the next gem or next big thing. And as I mentioned, from the centralized exchange point of view, there's a huge opportunities to invest in decentralized infrastructure projects. And at Bitget, we already listed several deep-in projects. And I think going and checking them out and trying to understand how real-world assets are already being tokenized in different projects and maybe investing in them can be a great way to start, especially the ones that have their own tokens and they're not USDT pegged. It might be definitely risky, but also there's a lot of innovation that is happening. We can zoom in and try to understand how they work.
Thank you, Vugar. Anna?
My ultimate goal, to extract real value from blockchain and crypto, bring it to the people, divide scam from not scam, help to educate people from Cointelegraph pages and my personal pitches and panels. And I experienced war in Ukraine, and crypto helped us to collect millions within hours, and we gave fiat money in 12 hours since the beginning of the war. I've seen the beauty of our technology, so I want to scale this beauty, hopefully not through war situations, but from more peaceful.
Thank you, Anna. And the host,
Yeah.
Mr. Zeebu?
So, going back to Robin's earlier point, and Anna's as well, that real-world asset tokenization, for it to be properly integrated and adoption to go all the way, we're still 5 to 10 years away, right? But I believe there's a phase-by-phase process to it. So going back to another one of Robin's earlier points, a lot, majority of the volume today, dollar volume today, is in Web 2. So I think the first step really is to bring that dollar volume over to Web3 and make it as consumptive as possible so the liquidity sticks. There needs to be a service provider and there needs to be a service consumer. So at Zeebu, that's really what we're all about. We want to bring in real-world services that were initially being rendered through TradFi, and we want those services to be activated on Web3. Hence, we've gone after telecom carriers as an example, right? Because their margins were struggling. They were struggling to actually make payments. There was a big problem with, pre-credited systems with the operators. They didn't have enough working capital. Bringing them to Web3 and giving them instantaneous payments, access to lending services, creating lending vaults. I think that was the first step to real-world asset tokenization of actually bringing Web2 liquidity and converting it to Web3. So I believe the first phase of RWAs is really converting Web2 liquidity to Web3.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming so early, and thank you so much for the speakers. Round of applause for everybody.
And thank you for hosting us today.
Thank you, guys. And
Let's take a selfie.